Experience is merely what men call their mistakes. Earlier this week, I finished The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and this is a classic I've known about for a long time now. I've learned about it in high school. We didn't read it back then, but it was one of those classics where my teacher was like, yeah, you should probably, if you want to learn more about classics, this is one. I also knew about it because Oscar Wilde in his heyday was a very controversial figure, and this book was very controversial. It got a lot of heat. It kind of led Oscar Wilde to an early demise because it was filled with things that the Victorians were apparently not a huge fan of. So this is one that I've kind of wanted to read for a while, and now that 2026 is my year of classics, I decided to dive into. And I'm very, very happy that I did, because I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very well written. First of all, the thing that sticks out immediately to me in this book is just how good the prose is. I feel like I'm going to say that for so many classics that I read throughout this year, but it's really true. Oscar Wilde has a real talent for language. His prose I want to say it's flowery. I want to say it's lush. It just, there's so many passages that I found really beautiful. I thought, the way he worded things was very nice. And he really kind of gets you in certain scenes. And, and the way he presents ideas throughout this is very, very interesting. The next thing that I really like about this book is the characters. The characters here are kind of wonderfully rendered, especially Dorian Gray and Lord Henry, who I think are the standout characters in this. Lord Henry is the man who kind of leads Dorian Gray to his downfall. Now, obviously, I'm going to get into Dorian Gray as a character, but Lord Henry, he is what I would call a 19th century rage baiter. He is this kind of person that we see in our modern American culture all the time, who would have a YouTube channel where he's just he's hating on women. He's just he's rage baiting. He's farming angry content. He's farming engagement content. He's just saying things. He has this philosophy and view on life where it's just yeah, I just say things. I just do things. The world is my oyster. And you should live life however you want. If that means being, a hedonistic, self-centered, vindictive, just vanity-filled human being, you should do that. And Dorian Gray, he receives that. Dorian Gray is this person, again, we see so often in our modern society, where it really feels like he had no sort of serious internal world, is what I'm going to say. He had no sort of serious moral compass. He kind of was this very innocent, naive man who encounters this weird older man who has all these controversial, loathsome views, and he just absorbs it. And he becomes this horrible, murderous, vanity-filled person who leads to the downfall of so many others. His behavior is just erratic. It's incredibly hedonistic. It is completely self-serving, egotistical, all the bad things, right? And it's really interesting to see because, on one hand, you love to hate Lord Henry because he has all these views, and at first you kind of feel bad for Dorian because, he's obviously kind of being taken advantage of, at least in my perspective. But also, at some point, you gotta have some sort of internal monologue to be yo, maybe I shouldn't listen to what everything everyone else says is true. Maybe I shouldn't just take the entire external world that somebody else is building for me and believe that. And I don't know, I just found it very, very compelling. I think the character writing here is really, really, really good. And I think the last thing that really compels me in this book is the philosophical musings combined with this kind of reflection that Oscar Wilde is holding up to Victorian society. Victorian society was extremely hypocritical. Every society is, but the Victorians were famous hypocrites. These wealthy elites were often the most hedonistic, awful people that you could read about in human history, and yet they had this kind of moral upstanding, I'm just so great, look at all the things I do, and Oscar Wilde is throwing that on full display throughout this book, and the philosophical musings are just as great. There are so many things that I don't think you're supposed to necessarily believe or take home as like good advice from like Lord Henry or Dorian or any of these other characters who are having philosophical musings. But it's definitely a book where you're gonna read the passage and you're gonna be like, that's gonna make me think about that. And it's just like he's engaging you in an intellectual expansion of, are these thoughts that people have legitimate or not? You know, should you actually think like this? Should you not? Does this belief have credibility? Does this belief not have credibility? And I found it very, very engaging. My only like issue with this book is the fact that there are sections in this that are incredibly boring. And I don't like saying that about any book, that it's boring, because ultimately that is entirely subjective. But everyone I've talked to about this book who's read it agrees with me that there are sections in this book that are incredibly tedious to get through. And they are the reason I would probably personally not reread it again. Because as much as I enjoyed the characters, as much as I enjoyed the prose, as much as I enjoyed the philosophical musings, there were just sections in this. And it's done on purpose. It's done on purpose. But that like are really tedious to read, because it's just like, this is Victorian life and it's the art of doing literally nothing. Nothing happens, or seemingly nothing happens for an entire chapter at a time. And it's just like, it's irritating to read, you know, as you know, maybe I just have TikTok brain or whatever. Maybe it's the ADHD, but I found it incredibly tedious to read. And I do think that if you come in with the expectation that this is going to be like a really exciting like adventure novel, like, you know, The Three Musketeers, or, you know, just some other classic like that that's really moving, you're gonna be disappointed. But I think if you come in with the right expectations that this is going to be a more philosophical, slower, self-reflection kind of book, one that's focused on condemning Victorian society, on, you know, examining what people like this are like, you know, these hedonists, these self-serving, vanity-filled people, you know, the Kardashians of the Victorian era, if you will, you'll have a good time. I think this is definitely for people who they like to sit and chew on a book. They like to think about it. This is one that I'm going to recommend more for people who, they like the philosophical side. They like the good writing. They like the character study, that kind of stuff, over, you know, someone who might want adventure or romance or anything like that. Ultimately, it's a very good book. I do recommend it to generally everyone who's interested, but, you know, just fair warning, might not be for everyone. I'm going to give it an 8.8 out of 10, and I really look forward to reading more classics.